In this series of videos, we're going to be looking at how to make a simple Space Invaders program using Python and pygame. Now, the reason I've chosen Space Invaders is because it's a very simple game to start off with, but you can still add quite a lot of complexity. So we can build upon Space Invaders quite a lot and learn a bit of pygame, decomposition, and good old-fashioned programming as well at the same time. Plus, I really like Space Invaders. And we have to have a little animation to go with it, obviously. Goes without saying. So to begin with, we're going to be looking at drawing the aliens. Now, we have to find some place to start when creating Space Invaders. And I chose this because A, get something on the screen really quickly, and B, without aliens, it would be a really rubbish game. So decomposing a problem and focusing on one part of the problem is a really crucial skill to learn as a programmer. But that itself isn't the end of the story, because even though saying draw the aliens is a place to start, we may want to break that down even further, okay, to make the problem even simpler. So we're going to break this down more. And the way to do it is to focus on drawing one alien. So can I draw one alien on the screen, yes or no? If I can, well, then I can draw a row of them. If I can draw a row of them, then I must be able to do all of them. So we start off with one part of the problem, get that solved, and then we can move on. So that's what we're going to look at. Now, pygame is split into two main parts, okay? Kind of a setup phase and the game loop itself. So the setup phase is where we're going to be doing things like loading up any images, any sound effects, and setting up the initial parameters and positions of all sprites and players and things like that. And the game loop is where all the actions are going to happen. So where we're going to draw the screen, where we're going to move things around, we're going to update sprites, we're going to do collision detection and things like that. So the game loop is going to run multiple times per second, and the initial part of the code is only going to run the once. So in order to get things working, we first of all need to load up an image for our alien. And now we're going to start to think of this alien not as an alien per se, but as a sprite, something I can control and put on the screen. So in order to do it, I need a picture of the alien, so an image, and I also need to find a way of representing that as a bit of data, okay? Now, thinking about an alien, it's got four main bits of information we're going to store about it. First of all, its X and Y coordinates, so that's where it's going to be on the screen, and also its width and height. And now we need to know the width and height as well as the X and Y coordinate, because ultimately, when we start shooting it, when it starts moving around and colliding with the player, we need that kind of boundary box for collision detection purposes. So that's why we're going to use the built-in pygame rectangle class in order to do this. Now, I'm aware some of you who might be a bit more advanced with pygame know that there is a sprite class which you can inherit from. However, we're not going to go down that road. We're going to keep this really simple. And I've got to put the animation back in, of course, goes without saying. So, once we can draw a single image on the screen, we then need to think about, okay, how can I change that code and update it in order to get all of them on the screen? Well, first of all, it's important to recognize I've got multiple aliens, which means this is the perfect opportunity to use a list. So all these aliens are going to be placed in a list. And remember, the alien is simply a rectangle. So I'm using a rectangle to represent them. So I've got a list of rectangles. Now, looking at each alien, the numbers are very similar. So the Y coordinate is going to stay the same because it's all on the same row. The width and the height are always going to be the same because they're the same size. Every alien is the same size. But the thing that is changing is the X coordinates. And if you look at the X coordinates on the screen, you'll see they're updating by 40 each time, which just so happens to be the exact width of the alien. Now, this will put the aliens very close together. So we could always make that number a little bit bigger, and that will spread them out a bit. So thinking about the pseudocode before we get into the real code itself, at the start of the game, we need to basically place all the aliens first. So all the setup, all the work's happening in the setup for this bit of code. So we load the image up, then we're going to create an empty list to store all these aliens in. And then we're going to, for every single alien, create a rectangle to represent it, starting off with an X coordinate of 10. That would just be the first X coordinate. Then we're going to add the rectangle to the list once we created it, and then add 40 to position to basically move it on to the next alien. Within the game loop, we're going to have another loop which is simply going to go over that list and draw each alien individually. So let's look at the code needed to actually draw the Space Invaders. So first, I'm going to run the code so you can see what it looks like. So as you can see, the invaders are on the screen, they're laid out in the right way, so that's all good. Now, to begin with, we have to import the pygame libraries and initialize them as normal. We then have to set the width and the height, and this is the width and height of the game screen you'll see when you run the program. And then I use the pygame method set mode, which will essentially create that graphic screen for us to draw to. I'm going to load up an image. Okay, so in this case, the Space Invader. So this is simply a very, very tiny, small picture, 50 by 50 pixels in my case, which I'm using to represent the alien. I then store that into a variable. Now I only need to load up the image once, even though I've got multiple aliens on the screen. They all use the same image, therefore I need to load that image up once. I then have a little variable which controls whether the game is going to start stop. Okay, I'm going to skip over my functions for now, and I'm just going to look at the main game loop. So in the main game loop, I first of all set up the invaders, and this will create me a list of Space Invaders for me to manipulate. Then inside the game loop, I have my event loop, which is simply controlling and being controlled by the quit event. Later on, I'll have keyboard events in there. Then I've got my drawing code. I start off with filling the screen black. And then I will draw the invaders by calling this function I've already created, and I'll show you that in a moment, which gets passed through the invader list and the actual screen to draw to. I then have to flip the screen and then finally wait a little while so the animation doesn't run too fast when I start doing it. So let's go back to our functions. Let's start off with the set of invaders functions. This is where the bulk of the work is happening. Now, initially to get this working, I create myself an empty list, and then I set my Y coordinate to be 50. That's going to be where the first row is going to appear on the screen. I then have two constants. One is the number of rows I'm going to draw, and the other is the number of invaders per row. Okay, so that's how many aliens I'm going to get each row. I've just picked those two numbers. You can obviously change this if you want to. Then in the outer while loop, I'm going to draw each row. Okay, so the outer loop is controlling the rows that I'm going to do, and I take 50, which is the height of my alien, and times it by the number of rows I want. That's effectively going to tell me how much space I need for it. I'm then going to have an X coordinate, which can control where the alien is going to be placed inside that row. So 50, and again I'm going to do the same trick where I have another loop because I'm going to draw each alien individually. And times 50, because that's the width of my alien, by the number of invaders I want per row. Then the bulk of the work happens on this line here, line 26. So invader list.append will add something to a list, and the thing I'm adding to the list is a rectangle. Now in pygame, rectangles are used for many, many purposes, for collision detection. In this case, I'm using it to say where I'm going to draw my alien. So the alien is going to have its X and Y coordinates, and then these two numbers here, 50 by 50, is the width and the height of my alien. So the new rectangle gets created and then gets appended to the list, and then I change the X coordinate, say, okay, move on to the next alien in that row. When this loop ends, it then adds 50 to the Y coordinate, i.e. move on to the next row, and just repeats again. And this will essentially create me a list of invaders, which gets returned by this function. If I kind of scan back down, you can see that function is being called here to set up the invaders. And then later on, you can see when I draw the invaders, I'm using that list. So if I go back up and we look at the draw invaders, it's a really simple function. I get passed through as parameter the invader list, and I use a for loop to go through it. So the way for loops work is it takes every item inside that list and makes I equal to it. So initially I is going to be equal to the first alien, then a second alien, and so on and so forth. Then I'm going to use screen.blit. Now what this does is it draws an image onto a screen. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but let's keep it simple for now. So it passed through the image that I'm drawing. Now remember, each invader looks the same, so I'm just using invader image each time. And then I use I. Now I is the actual invader. So remember, I is a rectangle, so it's basically the rectangle representing the alien. And that's it. So that draw invaders gets called in the middle of my game loop, and that's all we have to do. The next step is to get the aliens moving.